And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, great. We're going to go ahead and get started with Zoom into Success. If I can get this to work. And it's not working. There it is. Okay, there we go. So what we're going to cover is academic support services, accessible education services, and career development. First up, Kelvin Clark.
All right, good evening all. My name is Kelvin Clark and I serve as the Senior Director of Student Success here at Willamette. And I'm beginning the beginning of my 4th year. As Senior Director of Student Success, I have 3 different lanes of responsibilities. The first is academic coaching. So in many ways, that's helping students figure out how they want to be students, how they want to manage their time, how they want to study, what they want to be involved in. The second lane is peer tutoring, and the third is the first year experience. So if any of you were here for the first year experience webinar, hello again, same guy, just a different situation here. Now, academic coaching. Instead of just telling you what it is, I wanted to begin by telling you some of the outcomes, or more importantly, what we're able to achieve. So the first type of academic coaching is the academic success workshop. And I co-coordinate this with my colleague, Jessica Cardinal-Lanier, who you'll meet a little bit later, our college advisor. These workshops are the first 3 weeks of the semester, one on Wednesday, one on Thursday. And in the workshop, we do 3 things. We go over what does academic status mean? So what gets you in good standing, what places you on academic warning, what places you on probation, suspension, and then ultimately dismissal. The second thing we do is review all of the different academic and personal supports the campus has. So things like tutoring, coaching, the writing center, the digital language center, confidential advocates, counseling, and our chaplaincy. The third part is we actually, at the conclusion of the workshop, invite your students to come meet with us one-on-one to think about what will be their academic plan for the semester. To date, our academic success workshop started in spring of 19, and we have had 119 participants. And we have had 119 students attend, but 119 participants to go through the program to its completion. And we've been able to retain about 86% of students. But the true value, in addition to retention, is the GPA increases our students actually achieve. If you look at that last box, a 0.48, so almost a half of letter grade. So we're going from a B- to a B+ or an A to an A+. The second form of academic coaching are meetings with either myself, the college advisor, or a set of students who are trained to be peer academic coaches. The great part about peer academic coaches is, one, they're available after 6 o'clock. This is when Jessica and I leave for the day. But more importantly, they give advice for students or to students from the student perspective. Now, the peer academic coaches, this is in the second box. So far, a program created in spring 2020, we've been able to retain students. We're still working on getting that GPA up, but I think the idea of being able to complete all the courses that you start leads to another opportunity for students to increase their GPAs. Now, the last part of academic coaching is what we call the Students of Concern Committee. So if your student is missing class, or maybe they're not turning in their work, or maybe when they go to class, they're not as engaged as their professor would like, then the professors would submit a care report. This alerts the Student of Concern Committee to reach out to the student to see what's going on, what type of interventions can be provided, and how can we get the student to perform the way the professor expects. Next slide, please. Now, academic coaching has a lot of different components, and I'm going to talk about 4 today. The first is academic behaviors. Now, this is, when you wake up, when you go to class, when you do your homework for class, are you meeting with your professor during office hours? And the difficult thing for first year students is they are bringing a set of behaviors from the K through 12 system to the higher education arena. And sometimes those behaviors are not the ones that need to be performed in order to be successful. So the first question is, what's translating to success and where might you want to improve? I'm sorry, it's a little small, but over on the right-hand side, we have a simple learning strategies inventory. We're asking students, do you go to class regularly? Are you taking notes when you go to class? Do you review the notes after class? Are you following up with your professor? Are you looking at their comments? Or the kicker, How many hours per week are you studying for classes? That number can go up and down, as you can imagine. Next slide, please. Now, one academic behavior that I definitely want students to begin practicing is seeking support when needed, or help-seeking behavior. And tutoring is another program that I oversee. And what you're looking at here are the outcomes of tutoring so far. So first and foremost, it's a free service to all Willamette students. And students can get tutoring for any course as long as I can find the tutor, and they can have that support 2 hours a week. I put that little asterisk there because sometimes students need additional time with the tutor, and we can definitely work that out as well. On average, students request on average, there's about 68 requests that come in for tutoring. So that translates to roughly about 8% of the student population that uses these services. For the most part, first year and sophomore students use tutoring a little bit more than our juniors and seniors. And every semester, I employ anywhere between 41 to 71 tutors. So if all goes well for your student in their first year, they can definitely apply to become a peer tutor. I would love to have them. And tutors on average rack up about 875 hours per semester. So they do some significant work. Now that's the individual tutoring. So if you have a problem with the course, you can be paired. However, Willamette also offers a variety of group tutoring. Some is settled in the departments like physics or mathematics or chemistry, and we have a hearth situation. If you think about Roman mythology, the idea of gathering around a hearth to discuss interesting conversations or the campfire to form those relationships, this is what we do here. The cool part about the hearths are they are right in the middle of their professor's office. So as soon as the professor comes out, boom, your students are right there to get the support they need. Now, another form of tutor is what we call embedded tutor. Now, this is when a student has already completed the course and they choose to repeat the course one more time. That gives them information in real time, lets students know that they are there being model students. And twice a week, these embedded tutors hold group sessions. So for all students in that class, they can come and get help in real time for a person that's not remembering from last semester, but just a couple of hours ago. And we also have teaching assistant and section leaders. These are just similar to embedded tutoring, but just in different departments. Next slide, please. Now, another part of academic coaching is academic perseverance. And this is the ability for students to keep going despite they run into obstacles. It entails developing the growth mindset instead of the fixed mindset. And more importantly, it taps into Angela Duckworth's idea of grit. And that's when your passion, the things that you're really interested in, meets with perseverance. And that's your ability to persist despite interruptions, plans going wrong. And so with academic perseverance, we work on things like time management. And I help students realize that it's not just about the time blocks in the little boxes, but it's about your energy. There's physical energy, there's emotional energy, there's mental energy, and then there's spiritual energy. And I don't necessarily mean, your higher power, but I mean the things that bring you zen, the things that bring you peace. And I help students understand that if we can get these energies in line, then we can be successful. Next slide, please. So with time management, how much time is enough time? Before I begin to go into this, I want to say this is just an example. It may change according to different courses. But I like to tell students courses fall into roughly 3 different categories. There are ones, hopefully, fingers crossed, that you got under control. It could be because maybe you have an interest in it, you have experience in it, or it just clicks. For me, that was history. History came to me just like breathing. And when we have a course under control, there's not a lot of time we might need to dedicate to it, maybe 2 to 3 hours per week. And that could be maybe reading a textbook chapter. Now, sometimes courses go up another level, and we're looking at 4 to 6 hours because there could be more work or more difficult context. So you might have a textbook chapter, you might have an article, you have some homework assignments, and you might want to get together with a group of your classmates to study. But yet and still, there's a category of classes I like to tell students is holy cow hard. You are spending a lot of time dedicated to this course, 8 to 12 hours or more, right? So you could have the textbook, the article, a book review, homework, group presentations. And for a course that's a holy cow hard, you might be coming to see Kelvin to get tutoring, both individual just as well as group. and definitely taking advantage of your professor's office hours. Using this sort of numerical system, I like to remind students that school is your full-time job. And if you reach 40 hours of studying, fantastic, but you will definitely have to put in overtime. Next slide, please. Now, the whole goal of the programs I oversee, tutoring and coaching, it's designed to help students develop positive academic mindsets. And there's 4 of them. You know, what parts of the Willamette community do you feel most connected to? Do you realize that when you put into the work, your ability and your competence can grow? And as a result of that growth, you can succeed at this. And your major, your minor, what you've come to Willamette to do has real intrinsic value for you. And every single semester, I encourage students to think about that as a mini graduation, because now you have to go a little bit harder the next step. Next slide, please. Now, if I get all this right, or we get all this right, your student will develop a sense of belonging. And now, sense of belonging is an idea put forth by Terrell Strayhorn back in 2008, and he uses Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You know, it's a fundamental need for everyone to feel as though they belong. And how you feel, no, or rather how you belong changes from different environments. And this is what Nunn brings out. She says students feel connected to the campus, so that's your t-shirt that you get to wear. That's going to a sporting event. But then there's social belonging, and that's who your friends are and what groups you're associated with. And then, of course, there's academic belonging. That's succeeding grade-wise, that's choosing your major, and that's having the right academic interests for you. Now, if coaching and tutoring combined can do this, then we can help your students be successful. Next slide, please. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to my colleague, Jessica Cardinal-Lanier.
Great, thank you, Calvin. Hello, everyone. My name is Jessica Cardinal-Lanier, and I am the college advisor for the College of Arts and Sciences at Willamette University. And if students want to find me, I am located in Smallin 155. The easiest way to get a hold of me for students would be to simply send me an email, and my email is at the bottom. So I think that so some of the work that I do with students is particularly related to students who have been placed on academic warning and academic probation. And I want to take a minute just to let you know what that means and how it's determined here at Willamette University. So at the end of every semester, there is a committee called the Academic Status Committee. They meet and they review the academic records of every student here at Willamette. If a student's record shows that they have a slightly lower GPA or didn't complete enough credits, that could be some cause for concern. And that's when the committee would review it and determine if the student would need to be moved from good academic standing into academic warning or probation, potentially suspension and dismissal. So there are 5 categories that we have for academic standing. And students can move through these. They can go from good standing to warning back to good standing. A student can go from good standing, bypass warning, go into probation, go from probation back to good standing. So the first 3 are kind of fluid. Academic suspension is when a student is basically requested to take a break from the university. There is a pathway for that student to come back to the university, which typically requires them to, I believe, take some credits for transfer at another institution, and then transfer those back to Willamette. Academic dismissal is where the university completely severs the relationship with the student. Academic dismissal is it's a pretty extreme case. It's not used very often, so I won't talk a lot about that. I do want to note that the 3 academic standings that are highlighted in purple, which is probation, suspension, and dismissal, are transcript visible. And what that means is if a student were to land on any one of these academic statuses highlighted in purple, if a student was to print out their academic transcript, they would actually see that the notation academic probation, academic suspension, or academic dismissal on that. I do want you to know that students are notified at the end of every semester as to their academic standing if they've been placed on warning, probation, or suspension. And this comes in the form of an email from the registrar's office, as well as a letter to the student in snail mail to their permanent address that we have here on file. And there is a policy on academic achievement. So how these academic statuses are determined is based on this policy, and the criteria that are in this policy have to do with a student's GPA. So that is in their semester GPA, their cumulative GPA. So cumulative GPA is the GPA from all the semesters combined. It can be a major GPA and a minor GPA. When one or more of those GPAs falls below 2.0, that is some cause for concern because a student needs to have a 2.0 minimum GPA to be able to graduate from Willamette University. So an example of where a student could be placed on academic warning would be, so they have one semester of a GPA below 2.0, so say it's a 1.85. They would be placed on academic warning, they would be notified of that. Then in the following semester, the student would, if it's their first time on academic warning, they would need to complete the academic warning process. And this is where the student would be required to attend one of the academic success workshops that Calvin mentioned in his presentation. And then they would also need to have a follow-up meeting with myself or Calvin as well. A situation where a student would be placed directly, say, on probation from good standing would be if the semester GPA is significantly below a 2.0. And so that would be below 1.7. So if a student has a semester GPA, say of a 1.55, they would could go directly from good standing, bypass academic warning, and be placed on academic probation. Students who are on probation or those students who have been suspended and are returning from suspension are also placed on academic probation. They are required to meet with me on a really quite a regular basis. We meet about once every 2 weeks. And these meetings are intended to be very supportive of the student. They're meant to help them think about the things that potentially were going wrong the previous semester and how to set goals and steps to achieve those goals for this semester. I really work really hard with students to refer them to our various campus supports that we have that can include accessible education with Sue, who's going to be speaking next, any sort of time management activities, meeting with a college, setting them up with a tutor, getting in touch with financial aid, all those kinds of things. I also do grade checks with faculty twice a semester, and I do work with the student's faculty advisor and keep them in the loop as well. So those are all the things that I do to help support students in academic warning and academic probation. I do want parents and guardians to be aware that if you were to call my office with concerns about whether your student's placed on warning or probation, I cannot talk to you about that unless I have the express permission from your student. So I'm hoping that at some point in time, if not previously or in the future, you'll hear about FERPA, F-E-R-P-A, which is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. And this prohibits folks at Willamette from discussing a student's record without their express permission. So I am more than happy to talk with students' parents or guardians, but I do need to have the student's permission to do so. There's a form that the student does need to submit with the registrar's office, and I do double check that. Once I see that I have permission to speak to parents or guardians, then we can certainly have a conversation and set up that meeting. So, but primarily these meetings are with students. And again, I'm happy to talk with parents. Next slide, please. In addition to working with students on probation and warning, I advise for our dual degree programs as well. So we have the programs that I'm directly involved with are 2 programs. So students at Willamette, our undergrad students, have the opportunity to do a bachelor's of arts or science and combine that with a master's in business administration and complete both of those 2 degrees within 5 years. So we called it the 3+2 BA MBA program. There's also another one called the Bachelor's of Arts or Science and a Doctor of Jurisprudence that is completed within 6 years. So 3 years for the undergrad and then 3 years for the JD program. So you can see that doing the dual degree programs saves time and it saves money as well. So the idea is that the students, the undergraduate student would complete within the first 3 years of their undergraduate degree. They would complete their general education courses as well as their major courses and most likely a few electives. And for the 3+2 MBA program, they would complete within those 3 years a total of 92 credits. For the 3+3 JD, it is 96 credits. And how the student completes their 4th year and actually graduates with their bachelor's degree is that after the 3rd year, and say the student reaches those 92 credits for the MBA program, they move into the MBA program. The first year of their MBA classes double counts as their electives in their undergrad and completes their undergraduate major, and the student still gets to graduate with their class. If any student is interested in any of these programs, please encourage them to contact me as soon as possible. For a student to really complete the general education and the major within those 3 years, it requires a lot of planning, and that needs to start as soon as possible. And students who do these, they're still able to study abroad, they're still able to maybe double major, pick up a minor. But again, to do all that in 3 years requires a lot of planning. So again, just have the student contact me. They can also work with some of our folks in our admissions office and some folks in the MBA and JD programs as well. Next slide, please. And just some other general advising and teaching responsibilities that I have as part of my job. I really do work with any student from across the university. So I don't just work with students in the dual degree programs and students for onboarding or probation, but I will meet with any student who has an interest in talking about long-term curricular planning, thinking about different pathways and majors, especially for our undeclared students, and also doing additional advising to our students who are receiving multiple academic alerts. And this is what Kelvin had talked about before, is our care report program. And another thing that I do is I do teach a class. It's called IDS 105 Transitions to College Learning. This is a 2-credit course that's offered in the first half of the semester, and I offer it every semester. It is required for our students who are freshmen and sophomores who are on academic probation, but other students are also eligible to take the class. They just need to contact me and we can have a conversation about why they think this would be a good class for them to take. And some of the things that we talk about in the class cover creator and growth mindsets, how to make wise choices, developing interdependence, because a lot of our American culture is focused so much on independence. We also want to talk about interdependence, and this ties into using our campus resources, using tutoring, using accessible education, using our academic coaches, talking with faculty, reaching out and asking for help where needed. This is where the sense of interdependence comes from, and creating that sense of community at Willamette. And we also talk about emotional intelligence and ways to reduce stress. It's a fairly light course. So, on Calvin's scale of how much time you would need to dedicate to classes at Willamette, this would kind of be at the top, kind of the lower end. It's a fun class. Most students do enjoy it. So if you think this might be a class that your student is interested in, we can certainly have a conversation and see if we can get them in. Next slide, please. And our next speaker is Sue Minder, and she is our Director of Accessible Education Services.
Good afternoon, everyone. As Jessica said, I'm Sue Jinhee Minder. I'm the Director of Accessible Education Services at Willamette University. And unlike my esteemed colleagues, I am responsible for determining reasonable disability accommodations for undergraduate students, as well as graduate students. So I work with the College of Law and AGSM, as well as the graduate program at Pacific Northwest College of Art. If your student chooses to remain at Willamette for undergraduate and graduate degrees, and they need to have any sort of disability accommodations, then they will be with me all the way, or I will be with them. Next slide, please. Okay, so who should go to Accessible Education Services, or our acronym is AES? And next slide, please. If your student needs help in finding resources to succeed, so that can be anything from connecting students with Kelvin and or Jessica. There are students who, because of executive function impacts, and or other learning differences, may need more hands-on support with requesting a tutor, for instance. So if they needed that, then they could come into Smolin 155. I'm also located there, and either myself or our administrative programs assistant, Marcia, would help them, physically go online and fill out the tutor request form. Another resource that we have is a program called College Access Navigators. It is not on this slide. However, it's a program designed specifically to support neurodiverse students, so that students who identify as having ADHD or ADD, students who identify as being autistic, or students who just identify as neurodiverse with a learning difference. That program is full for the fall, but if a student is interested in getting on the wait list, I would advise that they contact our office and do that as soon as possible. My contact information is going to be on the last slide, which has my contact information and how to connect with our office. If the student is looking for more support in the classroom, so what I mean by accommodation supports can be anything from assistive technology for note-taking. Now, we don't provide the technology, but we can help the student get connected with either free, or low-cost resources, such as note-taking applications that are available on Windows and Mac computers. If really necessary, we can provide a peer note taker in the class. I encourage students to find a way to take notes in a way that's meaningful for them. So one of the things I tell students is, you were probably raised with the traditional idea of note taking, which means you have to write down absolutely everything. I tell students to find a way to capture content in a way that is going to be meaningful for them and in a way that will prompt their memory if they have a good memory, or there are note-taking applications that allow you to record the lecture as well as just write yourself a prompt, a memory prompt. You can also incorporate color coding for certain sections of the lecture, so that then when you are going back through the lecture, rather than listening to the entire recording, you can just tap on that visual marker that you've incorporated and go back to that section. So that's what I mean by in-class supports. If you have an injury that's affecting your performance in class, at Willamette, we have a concussion protocol. So we automatically provide a week of absence from class, as well as excusal from any class activities, meaning assignments, exams, group projects. All of those things are automatically excused for a week after the person sustains a concussion. The person, of course, the student needs to contact my office. And again, that information on how to do that will be on my last slide. But then I meet with them and I email all of their instructors notifying them of the concussion protocol. That's just one example of a temporary injury. Other temporary injuries that I have accommodated are broken wrists or arms. I've provided extended time on exams, note-taking support, extensions on assignment deadlines if that's necessary, short-term extensions. So sometimes students will come in and say, is it possible to get a month extension? That's generally not possible. The guideline that I give instructors is 1 to 3 days additional time for the student to complete the assignment. There are no requirements to schedule an appointment with AES. So very often a student will connect with our office if they suspect that they have a disability, or if they're not sure, but they're finding that they're experiencing barriers in the classroom, either with taking notes or finishing exams, or in the time allowed, or they've just always suspected that they've had a disability, but they've never been diagnosed. I should back up and say that a very common myth about disabilities is that it will be visible, meaning that you'll be able to see it. So a wheelchair user, someone who is blind, someone who is deaf. Generally, you can tell that by looking at them. But in all actuality, and this is true for institutions across the nation, 70 to 80% of the students who are registered for accommodations have non-apparent or less apparent disabilities, meaning that if you looked at them, you would not know, okay? So many students, and the majority of students who connect with AES who aren't sure whether they have a disability or have always suspected they do, but they don't know, are students who fall into this category. Okay, so things that AES can do. We can assist in determining their eligibility. So again, a common misconception among students is that, well, all I have to do is connect with AES and then my accommodations are final. That's not necessarily the case. If a student is not sure whether they have a disability, I can assist them in determining whether they're eligible immediately. Very often students are not necessarily eligible immediately for accommodations, but sometimes I can provide provisional accommodations contingent upon receipt of documentation. My office does not do assessments for disabilities, but I am able to refer to community practitioners who do. That can be challenging for students because there is generally a long wait list to get in to see someone who does assessments for disabilities. And I'm primarily talking about learning disabilities and learning differences. And the other barrier is that generally insurance does not cover these assessments. So finding one that meets with your family's budget and your family's ability to pay can be challenging. There are some sliding fee scale resources and some lower cost resources that can sometimes be found. That has been more of a challenge since COVID, but it is something that I can at least start the student on in that process. Okay, and I've talked about that, help you obtain documentation of a disability. So sometimes it doesn't mean that you have to go see a psychologist and get a full evaluation. Sometimes your family practitioner will be able to diagnose some disabilities, particularly mental health disabilities or a health condition that falls under the ADA, like type 1 diabetes. And there are some more minor things that your health provider may be able to provide documentation for. Facilitate non-classroom accommodations. So I'm responsible for academic accommodations and determining those, but I'm also responsible for determining housing accommodations. So if a student needed to request any sort of modification to their living arrangement, then they would also go through my office. The one thing I do not do is student employment accommodation. So if a student needed assistance with that, they would go through HR, and then HR would consult with me as needed, but they also have people in human resources who specialize in workplace or employment accommodations. Next slide, please. Okay, so what kind of accommodations are possible? And these are just some of the accommodations that are possible. Alternative text solutions for course readings. Generally, what that would look like is helping the student get connected with digital textbook libraries. And also we do some document conversion in-house of PDFs in particular that are not readable with a screen reader on a student's computer. Assistive technology resources. So again, we do not provide assistive technology, meaning we don't purchase it for students, but we can connect students with very often free or low cost options. There are also for cost options that we can refer a student to depending upon what their resources are and what kind of investment they want to make in their technology. Note-taking accommodations, again, generally I encourage students to use some sort of assistive technology or find a way to capture content in a way that's meaningful for them. but in rare instances, we do provide a peer note taker. And sometimes also for backup to the temporary injuries, we have provided temporary peer note taking services for someone who is unable to do that for a set period of time. Testing accommodations, usually that means some sort of a time extension on the exam and a reduced distraction testing environment. So the student is able to test outside of the classroom in a separate testing area with very few or no other students. Course by course negotiations of accommodations with professors. What I mean by this is that if any of your students had a 504 in high school, there are accommodations that are available under a 504 or an IEP that may not be available at the college level. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. So an example of that is if a student has a 504 or an IEP in high school, very often they will be allowed to use notes on exams, for example, or have open book exams. Sometimes they will be able to use both notes and an open book. That's not automatic at the college level. So if a student is needing an accommodation like that, then part of my job is to do a course by course negotiation with their instructors on what is possible for your exams, what are you willing to permit. Often what that ends up looking like is a professor will say, well, I'm willing to let the student use some memory prompts, but it needs to be restricted to one page and I need to approve it before the exam. So that's just an example of an accommodation that would need to be negotiated beforehand by my office. Next slide, please. So if your student's ready to meet with us, you can contact us to set an appointment at 503-370-6737. And then, or at accessible-info@willamette.edu. We also have an online application and I have the link here as well as a QR code. So if a student is on the go, as so many students are, they can scan their phone and fill out our application that way. It is completely confidential. Our database meets FERPA regulations, and the only people that will know about your student's application is our office. If they do have documentation of a disability and they're using a computer, they can upload it with their application at the time they fill it out. If they do not have it with them, then we can discuss with them how they can get that to our office. Okay, next slide, please. So again, I'm part of the Student Success Hub at the undergraduate level. I also do work with graduate students though. So I work with the College of Law, AGSM, and the graduate student at PNCA. I'm located in Smullen 155. And students can reach me by stopping by the office or simply sending me an email to accessible-info@willamette.edu. And then I also have our website there. And I will pass it on now to Mandy Devereaux, our fabulous Director of Career Development.
Thank you, Sue. I'm Mandy Devereaux. I'm the Director of Career Development here at Willamette. And I get to talk with you about all of the wonderful ways that we will help your student prepare for careers. One of the things we really like to focus on is early career engagement, really trying to help students engage in the career development process early and often. So one of the ways we do this, and one of the first ways we may end up meeting with students is they may need a part-time job on campus or in the community, and we will work with them to help them find that. We've already sent some emails out to students about finding part-time jobs on campus. There are still several open, so we can help them on their resumes. We can help them find those opportunities, help them prep for interviews and things like that. We also work with them on not just finding their first job or a part-time job while they're here, but also exploring their interests and their values and what's important to them, particularly as they start to move into major selection or start thinking about summer opportunities, internships, research experiences, fellowships, things like that. Sometimes we're working with students more on the exploration, what they're interested in, what careers align with that. And sometimes it's more on the application process, their resume, their cover letter, their personal statement, and all the things that kind of go into that career exploration. Our office is really framed on a model called career communities, which is really a wonderful way to really be inclusive of the liberal arts as a way to help students prepare for careers. As many of you may already be aware, liberal art degrees don't necessarily equal, if you're a philosophy major, there's not necessarily a job to be a philosopher, but it teaches you a large amount of transferable skills that employers are looking for. So we really help students understand how the liberal arts degrees help them develop career readiness skills and career readiness competencies, and then help them explore what career communities or what industries they're interested in, and find internships and experiences that help them kind of try on those things so they can decide, is this something that I really like, or do I perhaps want to explore other things? So we do this through informational interviews. We have a very rich alumni database that we have students connect with alumni and have conversations, connect to employers in internships. We do help with the job and internship search, whether that is a local internship that we can offer here in Salem, or perhaps they're looking for something in the summer. There's many ways for students to find those internship opportunities. There's also various ways that they can obtain academic credit for their internships as well, either through our office or through their department, and we can help with facilitating both of those. We do use a tool called Handshake. A lot of students log into that pretty early in their academic time here at Willamette, because it is how students find part-time jobs. And a lot of our students do work while they're here on campus, or they just want to set up their profile so they can meet with a career advisor, as I said, early and often, just to make that introduction. We love support from families to encourage that, to have your student meet with us. I think there are sometimes assumptions that career either happens after the university, or they should meet with us senior year, or that they need to know exactly what it is they want to do before they meet with a career advisor. And we really want to meet with them early on, and they absolutely don't have to know yet what they want to do. They can be exploring, or even just wanting to build a relationship with all of the supports that they have here at the university, even making that first college ready, resume or cover letter. As students do go through the university, our conversations with them start to get what they want to do after graduation, job search, perhaps they want to relocate, or they want to go to graduate school or professional school. We also help with that process as well. A lot of students evaluate, should I do this or that? And we go even through the process of decision making with them. You can also book appointments with the career team on Handshake. That's how our students actually make appointments with us. We offer a 30-minute or 60-minute. Right now we're offering Zoom or in person, just kind of depending on what the student prefers. You can actually click on that link if you want to meet the career development team. We have been fortunate to grow our team this past year. We're actually adding another team member, hopefully this fall, as we kind of round out our career community model. We're actually getting more expertise within specific areas. So we do have a career advisor who's specific to business and entrepreneurship. We have a career advisor who works specifically with students from underrepresented and marginalized identities. We are also getting a career advisor, or actually a pre-health director, to work with our health professions programming. And then we also have a colleague in in Portland at PNCA who works with our arts, media, and communication students. So we have several advisors and directors on our career team that are eager to meet with your students and talk about their career and help them gain experiences that will help them explore what they might want to do.
Okay, thanks everyone. Stop sharing the screen, and now is an opportunity for those of you in attendance. Feel free to put your questions in the Q&A box that's at the bottom of your screen, and we are happy to answer any questions that you might have. And I see that some have already been answered while we've been going through the program, so that's great. And while we're waiting for another question to pop in, I'm wondering if any of the panelists can think of a common question that they get asked by parents or family members that would be useful to share here.
I think one common question that I get as working with students on academic probation and academic warning is, primarily students are like, how do I get off academic probation or academic warning? That's very common because students are very concerned about what that means. And it can be, for some students, they can move back into good academic standing within one semester. It is very possible for a student to do that, especially if it's just that semester GPA that has placed them on a negative academic status. One good semester can move them right back into good standing. So I think students hearing that is, it kind of relieves some stress and a little bit of anxiety. Another common theme that I do see when I work with students who are on probation is that it's students struggle academically, not because they're not intelligent or smart enough to do the classes. It tends to be something in their personal life that is affecting their ability to be successful, whether it's, some things have happened where there's a death in the family, or there's an illness, or, the student loses a job, or they need to take on more jobs. These other personal things is what is affecting their ability in their classes to either go to class or do the homework. So that is a very common theme that I see with students who are on warning and probation. So just to know that students they're not alone in their experiences, and that's just while each student's experience is very particular to them, that's sort of that broad overarching theme that I do see.
Thank you.
Do we have a question about executive skills and what type of support can be provided? If you can rehash the college access navigators, I think that would suffice.
Sure. So Accessible Education Services offers a program called College Access Navigators. However, it is full, and I am accepting names to put on a wait list. So just so that you're aware of that. But there are two parts to the program. One is a class that I teach called IDS 170, Skills for Navigating College and Careers. And some of the topics that I cover in that class are emotional intelligence, advocacy, and self-advocacy. So self-advocacy is knowing when to ask for help and who to ask. And that sounds very simple, but for a lot of students with executive function impacts, it's not simple. It's very similar to what Jessica was talking about interdependence, only, I'm calling it self-advocacy, but it's really knowing when you can't just rely on yourself and you need to go to a resource for assistance. I also cover some intro to resume writing and a unit on executive functioning, and what it is and what are some strategies a student can use to improve their executive function skills. even with disability related barriers. And then also there's a unit on social interaction and student activities. And so that's one part of the program. And the other part is weekly meetings with what I call a navigation assistant, but you can think of it as a peer mentor. So it isn't coaching per se. It is more someone to provide some hands-on assistance for accessing campus resources and or communicating with an instructor about something that might be difficult, like a missed assignment, or I did really badly on this test and I'm wondering how to get support for that now, or I want to ask the instructor for feedback, but I'm really embarrassed. How do I handle this? Navigation assistants are student employees, but they're older students. So I don't hire anyone who is not at least a sophomore, and usually they are juniors or seniors. So those are the two parts of the program. And then some of the successes the program has had. This will be the third year running, and I've consistently had students or had 40% or higher students ending the year with GPAs over 3.0. That is the sorts of supports that AES, Accessible Education Services, can offer for students with executive function impacts.
Thank you so much. Okay, Kelvin, can you talk a little bit about, the question is, many students in the incoming class struggled with academic engagement at some point in the last year. What is the expectation of the university as far as their readiness to dive into college? Will there be anything to support their ramping back up to learning? And I know you're an expert on the first year experience program, so I thought you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the fantastic thing about CHASE, which stands for Community Building, Healthy Relationships, Academic Success Experience. Now, what this is a complement to the college colloquium, where students will be with their faculty advisor / academic advisor. However, one day a week, students get together for exactly 1 hour and go through 14 different segments, starting with how do I engage? How do I get it all done? Thinking about time management. What are my resources on campus? What are my values? And where can I get support? Now, the CHASE, which is that 1 hour together, is headed by a colloquium associate, just as well as a campus partner. So that gives your student two different linchpins in order to get to support, one from the student perspective and the other from a professional staff member as well. Students are allowed to meet with both their colloquium associate and their campus partner as they need to. Now, this is the beauty. Colloquium associates and campus partners don't grade your students, so the conversation can be honest and they can say, I don't know how to do this. I often find that students, the imposter phenomenon is real, so they don't want to let their professors know what they don't know. But it is our goal through CHASE every single week to get on a question that pertains to transition. Now, in addition to CHASE, all of the supports that we've mentioned today are also available. So it really will be up to your student to figure out which method will be the best for them to succeed.
Thank you. Okay, Sue, there's a question for you. How many students are in the class that you described?
I teach it once a year and the number varies, but this fall there are 10 students, but there are 20 students enrolled in the program, and I have to cap it at that because of the budget for the peer mentors.
Okay, and then also another follow-up is, how long are the classes and when do they take place?
This fall, they are scheduled Wednesdays and Fridays from 3 to 4. Typically, though, we go from 3 to 3:45. And that's this fall's schedule. It changes every year.
Thank you. Okay, I don't see any other questions from the participants. We'll give it a 10 seconds or so here, and then otherwise we will wrap up. Again, if you joined us a little bit late, we will be putting the recording of this webinar as well as the slide deck from the presenters onto the Willamette website, and you may access it at least for the fall semester. So feel free to return to this information at any time. And also, we're all an email or a phone call away. We want to be here not only for your students, but for you as family members. Please don't hesitate to contact us if we can be of assistance. And if you're not sure who to call, at Willamette, we're really good about knowing who does what for the most part. So if you call me and I can't answer the question, I will probably know who does that work, and I can redirect you. So feel free to use us as resources and encourage your students to use us as resources as well. Not only do we have the Chase resources that Kelvin was describing, we're going to have new student orientation starting next week, things going on in the residence halls if your students live on campus, lots of opportunities for your students to start engaging with this material and with meeting the faculty and staff on campus in the coming weeks. So we will be talking about these resources with your students many times throughout the semester, and so they will be getting this information as well. There's a question here about including PNCA. So I'm not sure if we're referring to Sue's class or to orientation, but I'll start with, I know that PNCA also has an orientation program next week as well, and they will be covering many of the same topics and going over the resources with all the incoming students at PNCA.
I think the question about PNCA may have been related to a question about is academic probation common, and
Okay.
what are sort of that broad theme that I had discussed earlier. And so let's see, I have to go back with the exact question. No, the question was, does that include PNCA? And the question was, how many students do I work with? And I only work with students in the College of Arts and Sciences. So in fall semester, I typically, and again, this is a rough estimate, somewhere between 20 and 30 students on academic probation. And those numbers go up in spring semester, and usually around 30 to 40 students on academic probation in the spring. And that does not include students from PNCA.
Okay, we have one more question here, and then we're going to wrap it up, and I'm going to direct this to Kelvin. It's a two-parter. Where would a student find their class schedule, and what should they do if the books are not yet determined for those classes?
Yeah, so with reference to the first question, with the books on the first day of class, and this is maybe not the best answer, on the first day of class, students will attend and receive their syllabus. So if the professor or the faculty member has not put the request in the bookstore yet, then on the first day of class, that sort of information will be dispersed. With reference to the second question, so within the students portal, we call this SAGE. They should have, let me back up. Your students should be checking their Willamette email. And within their Willamette email, our colloquium associates, which will be their peer mentor for the entire first semester, has sent them instructions about 3 things: where to access books, 2, how to get into their portal to review their class schedule, and then the colloquium associate is available to answer all questions for them. So I would encourage you to encourage your student to check that email from their colloquium associate or their colloquium professor, and instructions should be there.
Great, thanks, Kelvin. All right, well, thank you so much for joining us for this webinar. And again, if you'd like to view a recording or look at the slide deck, it will be available on the website. It'll take us a couple of days. We'll be adding closed captioning to that video, but then it will be available for you throughout the fall semester. So enjoy your evening, and thanks again for joining us.